Certainly. Here's the beginning of the story written with your requested style and structure. The night was supposed to be perfect, their honeymoon night. A soft glow from the moon illuminated the dimly lit hotel room as James poured 2 glasses of champagne, his excitement bubbling as much as the golden liquid. He turned to his wife, Clara, who sat on the edge of the bed, her face serene. Yet a faint uneasiness lingered in her eyes. To us, to forever. James raised his glass with a grin that radiated pure joy. Clara hesitated for a moment, then clinked her glass against his. To truth and love. Her voice trembled slightly, but James, lost in his own euphoria, didn't notice. They drank, talked, and laughed, sharing dreams of a future together. But as the hours ticked by, Clara grew quieter, her eyes darting toward the window, avoiding his gaze. Finally, she set her glass down, her hands trembling. "James, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. He chuckled softly, reaching for her hand. "What could possibly be so serious tonight? We're married. Life's perfect now, right?" Clara pulled her hand away, her heart pounding. "Please, just listen. This is important." The jovial warmth drained from James's face as he caught the urgency in her tone. "All right, I'm listening." Clara took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. "James, I wasn't born as Clara. I'm transgender." The room fell deathly silent. The soft hum of the air conditioner seemed deafening. James blinked, his mind struggling to process her words. "What are you saying?" His voice cracked, a mix of confusion and disbelief. "How could you do this to me?" he hissed, his voice low but laced with venom. Clara backed away, sensing the shift in his demeanor. "James, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you." "Shut up," he snapped, his eyes narrowing. "You think sorry is gonna fix this?" The air grew thick with tension, the once loving atmosphere now charged with hostility. James's fists trembled as he stepped toward her, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You've destroyed everything." Clara sobbed, her back against the wall. "James, please. I love you." But his love had turned to something dark, something unrecognizable. "You tricked me," he roared, his voice echoing off the walls. "You made a fool out of me. Everyone's gonna know I married a—" He stopped himself, his fists clenched tightly. "James, I'm still the same person you fell in love with," Clara cried, tears streaming down her face. "I'm still me." But James wasn't listening anymore. His mind spiraled, replaying every moment of their relationship, now tainted by what he saw as betrayal. His breathing grew heavier, his jaw tightening as anger consumed him. "How could you do this to me?" he hissed, his voice low but laced with venom. Clara backed away, sensing the shift in his demeanor. "James, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you." "Shut up," he snapped, his eyes narrowing. "You think sorry is gonna fix this?" The air grew thick with tension, the once loving atmosphere now charged with hostility. James's fists trembled as he stepped toward her, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You've destroyed everything." Clara sobbed, her back against the wall. "James, please. I love you." But his love had turned to something dark, something unrecognizable. James's breathing grew ragged, his chest rising and falling like a storm brewing within. Clara could feel the intensity of his anger hot, suffocating, and ready to boil over. "You love me?" James spat, his words dripping with venom. "You don't even know what love is." He grabbed the edge of the nearby table, his knuckles white with rage. "You've lied to me from the start. You took my life, my dreams, and twisted them into this." Clara flinched as his voice thundered through the room. "James, I didn't twist anything. I've been me this whole time," she pleaded, her hands shaking. "I didn't know how to tell you because I was afraid of exactly this reaction." "You knew what you were doing," he bellowed, slamming his fist down on the table. The vase that sat atop it teetered, then crashed to the floor. "You knew this would destroy me. Did you laugh about it? Did you think it was some kind of game?" "No," Clara screamed, her voice breaking. "I was terrified, James. I love you more than anything. That's why I was scared to lose you." But James wasn't hearing her anymore. His rage had taken over, blinding him to everything but his own pain. "Scared to lose me? Well, guess what? You did." He pointed at the door, his fingers shaking. "Get out of my sight, right now." Clara froze, her tears blurring her vision. "Please, don't do this. We can work through this together. You love me. I know you do." James took a step forward, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. His eyes burned with something primal, something unhinged. "You don't get it, do you?" he hissed. "There's no together anymore." Suddenly, his hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with a force that made her cry out in pain. "You lied to me, made me a joke." His voice dropped to a whisper, each word chilling her to the core. "And now, you're gonna pay for it." Clara's heart raced as panic set in. "James, let go of me," she begged, her voice trembling. But his grip only tightened. "You don't get to just walk away from this. From me," he growled, dragging her closer. She struggled against him, her fear mounting. "Please, you're scaring me." "Good," he roared, his face inches from hers. "You should be scared." Clara's eyes darted around the room, searching desperately for a way out. The door was too far, and James's grip was like iron. Her only hope was to calm him down, to make him see reason. "James, I know you're hurt," she said softly, trying to steady her voice. "But violence isn't the answer. Please, just let me go, and we can." "Shut up," he yelled, shoving her backward. She stumbled, hitting the wall with a thud. Clara's vision blurred as pain shot through her back. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her legs felt like lead. She barely had time to react before James closed the distance again, his face contorted with fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "I gave you everything. My heart, my soul, my future. I never wanted to hurt you," Clara cried, her voice breaking. "I just wanted to love you." But James's anger only deepened, his movements becoming erratic. His eyes darted to the shattered glass on the floor, a dangerous glint flashing in them. Clara's breath hitched as she followed his gaze. "James, don't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. James's hand hovered over the largest shard of glass on the floor. For a moment, his fingers trembled as if he was fighting against himself. But the rage within him refused to subside. He grabbed the shard, gripping it so tightly that blood began to seep from his palm. Clara's heart raced as she pressed herself against the wall, tears streaming down her face. "James, please, don't do this," she sobbed, desperation thick in her voice. But James's mind was lost in a haze of betrayal and fury. "You don't get to ruin my life and walk away like nothing happened," he snarled, taking a step toward her. Clara knew she had only seconds to act. Summoning all the courage she had left, she darted past him, making a frantic dash toward the door. "Help! Somebody help me!" she screamed, her voice echoing down the hotel hallway. James turned, his bloodied hand clutching the shard tightly. "You think you can run from this? From me?" he shouted, his voice ragged and furious. Clara fumbled with the doorknob, her hands trembling so much she could barely grip it. Just as she managed to fling the door open, James grabbed her by the shoulder, pulling her back into the room. "No one's coming to save you," he growled, his voice full of venom. In her panic, Clara kicked wildly, her heel connecting with his shin. James let out a pained grunt and stumbled back, giving her just enough time to grab a lamp from the bedside table. She swung it with all her strength, the heavy base smashing against the side of his head. James collapsed to the floor, blood trickling down his temple as he groaned in pain. Clara dropped the lamp, her hands shaking uncontrollably. For a moment, all she could do was stare at him, her chest heaving as adrenaline coursed through her veins. Then reality snapped back into focus. She bolted out of the room, screaming for help as hotel staff and guests rushed to see what was happening. The aftermath. James was arrested that night after being treated for his injuries. In court, Clara testified about the events that led to his violent outburst. The trial was a media sensation, with public opinion divided between those who sympathized with James's sense of betrayal and those who condemned his actions as monstrous. Ultimately, James was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Clara, though physically unharmed, bore deep emotional scars from the ordeal. She later moved to another city, changed her name, and began rebuilding her life, determined to never let fear dictate her choices again. This tragic tale teaches us the profound importance of honesty and communication in relationships. Secrets, no matter how difficult, have a way of surfacing, often with devastating consequences when trust is broken. At the same time, it also highlights the need for compassion and understanding. Anger and betrayal are natural emotions, but violence is never an acceptable response.